and welcome to Mystic Brew. I am Radagast, and tonight I guess I'm calling this The Danger, Will Robinson, The War for Humans. I've been reading 3 different books at the same time. Morgoth's Ring, which is an examination of Tolkien's Silmarillion, which starts with the Ainulindale, which is the singing of the world into creation. So it's a creation story. Reading Not in His Image by John Lamb Lash, which is about the Sophianic or Gnostic creation story, but it's really about the Sophianic one, because Gnostic is it's a troubled term in certain ways. And then I'm also reading, what is this book by Anton Park's Eden, The Truth About Our Origins. So it's another creation story, made from decoding the many of the cuneiform tablets that have been found all over the Middle East, and especially in the area of Mesopotamia. And the interesting thing is how much they have in common. Of course, the Sumerian one has probably the most in common with the creation story that comes out of the Old Testament, because there's a lineage. And one of the interesting things of Anton Parks having to learn how to translate it, and explaining the troubles and giving some of how it, it first gets the actual literal translation of it, and then trying to form it into a modern syntax. The little pieces of clay that have broken off or been beaten off. Fortunately, there's so many of these texts that sometimes you'll find one that's missing something, then you'll find another one that basically has the identical thing and has what was missing. So having to collate all that. And but in many ways, what unfolds in so many of these narratives, especially when it comes to interference, is that there's been a battle going on for our energy and our capacity to be creative for a very long time. Jealousy is a big part of this. Jealous of humans, jealous of between beings who would take stewardship of us. It is a history of fuckery. And so anyway, so my premise of Danger, Will Robinson ties in a little bit with disclosure, as I kind of covered in my last 2 Mystic Brews. I'm kind of losing track because I'm on a theme, which is to get us to be able to find the unity that we can have by discovering the installations of programming into I'm not going to call it software, I'm going to call it wetware. Software is computer. We're wetware. But we work a little bit like software. Matter of fact, I'm quite sure software is an artificial contrivance of our wetware. And so the Danger, Will Robinson has to come from the fact that as I mentioned in one of my last videos, about the convergence of the disclosure, ET disclosure, because I'm going to parse out disclosure a little bit more. And also the Vatican apparently wanting to baptize the aliens when they arrive. So, and one of the things, in some of my other recent videos, I've kind of taken to task a little bit about some of the books, old books, sacred books, but I feel equal time has to be turned to modern books. And so let me see what I wrote down for myself here. And one of them is Scientism. Okay, Scientism is people like Bill Nye, who has degree in mechanics, speaking against people who have degrees in science, and telling them that he has especially around climate change. It's not global warming anymore, it's climate change. And how to speak against it is kind of like a new heresy. The hysterics about pulling out of the Paris Accords or whatever protocols that were part of managing CO2. And people like John Coleman, who started the Weather Channel, being on interviewed on CNN and completely saying the reason I had to leave is because I'm a meteorologist and I have access to the same data these people do, and I actually have the right to I have the brains to interpret it. And so when they say, what about other scientists? They go, hey, they have a living to make. Basically, they have a product to produce in the modern commercial world. And the people who pay for that product are the ones they're going to gear the product for. And we're not really the ones paying for science. We're not the ones giving the grants. I mean, they might use our money, but, that's been taken from us. So scientism is one of the modern isms, and that's the other thing. Beware of isms, and try not to consider yourself an ist. These are systems. These are traps. These are programs, and they're meant to tie us up and bind us. And they bind us psychologically. They bind us into beliefs that few of us really have the acumen to really decipher. Again, we're in, when it comes to religious matters, there's what we'll call the priestly caste. And then when it comes to science, we have this, the scientist caste. Science at one time was best done multidisciplinary. Now, somebody, I can't speak on that because that's outside my field. So when we're looking at a really big picture that really needs to be multidisciplinary and probably elucidated by somebody who has some kind of multidisciplinary background, we don't get that. And the ones who do are the ones who are considered heretics. That nobody's quite using that word because that means, again, it comes from the Greek word heresia or something like that, and it means to choose. And originally, that's all it ever meant, was a choice. Once things started getting a little organized around belief systems, heresy then took on that you're choosing what is wrong according to a belief system. And so part of my focus today is the belief systems that are not part of, quote-unquote, a sacred system. And because they're a little bit easier to talk about, there isn't as much emotional attachment, at least not on the surface. Atheism. Atheism is another ism. And so many people who still might have sacred roots allow some interpretation of the universe to be done through their priestly caste. The atheists, and I was one for a few minutes, coming out of having been an altar boy and having been given a God concept, let's call it, that I went, ooh, man, I can't hang with that. Being an atheist long enough to find a few other more palatable God concepts that at least seem to be able to keep up with my own ability to be kind, to be forgiving, to show some wisdom, and to not want power over others. So what we're seeing is that there's the new camp. The people, the priestly caste are aware that their grip on society is loosening. And it's been seen for a while. I mean, it's a couple of 100-year thing we got going here. Probably, starting in the Renaissance period. And then science was starting actually to set people free a bit. So that's when science had to be clamped down on, because the maintenance of systems of control is paramount to the controllers, the ones who are at war with a free, loving humanity. Yeah, we have our squabbles, and we even kill each other sometimes. But left to our own devices, we won't raise whole armies based on every fighting age man in in whatever you call your state or province going into organized combat. And usually, of course, with in the more organized they get, they have the uniforms and they have the insignia. I mean, you are ritualized out for your death. So in many ways, so that's kind of like the state is also its own religion. It has the monopoly of violence. You can't settle amongst yourself. If any violence can be done, it's going to be done by the state. And then of course, we're kind of been told that we're such a mess we couldn't do these on our own. And after a few thousand years of messing with our psychology, there's some truth into that. It doesn't have to be, because if we can unplug, if we can uninstall the many installations of some ism or other, we can start to coordinate with each other. There's actually a pretty beautiful Luther Burbank quote I found. Let me get my mouse correct here. And this is by Luther Burbank. He's one who grew thornless roses. He did amazing things. And this is a quote from him. "Listen patiently, quietly, and reverently to the lessons, one by one, which Mother Nature has to teach, shedding light on that which was before a mystery, so that all who will may see and know." Mother Nature, the ecosystem, the one system that we came out of, the one system that sustains us, that only asks for a little bit of labor. If we want more, we're going to have to labor a little bit. But there's no tax, there's no interest. The land is there to be used until a system other than an ecosystem shows up. So, and then what's really interesting, again, and what's very common, if you're not familiar with the Sophianic narrative, just put in John Lamb Lash and try to listen to something from a couple of years ago. Google that on YouTube. Google it. Go onto YouTube and in the search, put his name. You'll find a bunch of stuff. Try to find something a couple of years old. The only reason why is he has maybe gotten too close to the flame, and I recommend what he had to say a few years ago as opposed to where he is now. I still love the man. He's been a teacher, but I got to recognize what it is, and he's actually thinking he's gonna, from what he says, he's gonna pass the torch on, and I just think he is aware of it. But he has been the big voice there. But in Eden by Anton Parks, there's one point where they had like a devastation of nature, and so they're replanting, and there's a little passage in there where they speak about, this is one of the Anunnaki, one of the ones who were held kind of like as the gods, so to speak, and they talk about them praying to the earth so that that she might help them bring up the seedlings. So and I could, it's not important what passage, but when I read that passage, and then that first of all, they're praying to who? Well, apparently they're directing it towards the earth that she might give them seedlings. Hello, so. And not to mention, we all hear about them that in the Anunnaki story they tinkered with our genetics, but that's because there was already something here. And then you go into certain one, like I guess in certain texts that we find in South America, where I think they might be Mayan, where in some of the tweakings there's a dissatisfaction because we're too smart. just kind of like what happened at the beginning of the 1900s. So that's the 20th century, when certain people, Rockefeller's name comes up, where the education systems were too good. They had to degrade the education systems because people would be too smart to fall into the kind of slavery that they had been in, and was going to be increasingly worse. 1913, the Federal Reserve shows up. Before then, people hadn't paid taxes. If you earned money, that was your money. You might have, there might be, when you bought something, there could be maybe a local tax, but I mean, your money came to you. There wasn't all this money that you owed. So, obviously, that system, and which initially didn't hurt so much, a dollar was a dollar's worth for a long time. Now it's worth a few cents. They needed people who couldn't see that and couldn't think their way out of that situation. But even scientism is starting to fail. I mean, the heretics of scientism, especially in certain ways, climate denier. A climate denier is, a heretic. So they can see that the religions have been losing their grip. Science is losing its grip. What do they need? They need the two of them to come together, and as I've said this before, deliver Mr. Spaceman. And I can feel it, I can smell it, I can almost, and when I close my eyes and I look, I see it wanting to happen. And that's part of the reason why I'm discussing this, because if more and more people may become aware that this, tell us about E.T., tell us about E.T., they might, realizing that, watch what you wish for, because who's going to deliver it? And you can see the sides lining up. I mean, I'm not going to mention any names, but there is certainly a group that we are all, anybody's in the forums, or even not, you don't even have to be in a forum, that there's a group of very well-known people who are now kind of, I think it's Disclosure Now might be the name it goes under. Just we don't have to name any persons. And then again, we're reading more and more about the Vatican getting ready for, what looks like the inevitable. So when I think of disclosure and the kind of disclosure I'd want, we know that, there's people like Catherine Austin Fitts, who you've seen any number of places. She's on money, the different guys who do regular money blogging. Dark Journalist has had her, but I mean, she's been all over the place, and she's the one who also talks about the missing trillions. Recently, the Pentagon, just before, on September 10th, the day before the infamous 9/11, it had been announced the Pentagon was missing $3.2 trillion. Just so happens that whatever flew into the Pentagon happened to fly into where those records were stored. All right, so that's 3.2, and then recently, I guess it's 6 point something trillion is missing. So where is this money going? And most of us kind of know it's going to a technology that's not being shared with us, and when it is shared, it's been monetized at some way. Whether iPhones and their touch screens or whatever, all transistors. It's basically when any of this technology that gets discovered, the military finds out what weaponizing potential there is there, and the corporations find out what kind of weaponizing of money, profit potential there is there. And then it gets rolled out as what's new is hot. People waiting on lines to get the latest iPhone, even though they have one. So you kind of see what has happened. So I know personally, for me, when I hear about, and a lot of people might be missing these kinds of things because that's not where they're interested in. Oh, who cares about that stuff? Well, as a taxpayer, we should all care. And for me, one of a big disclosure I would like is, where did the fucking money go? Disclose that, bitch. That is a major, because I mean, the infrastructure is rotting. People who are very dependent on government services, for better or worse, There's no money available. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has lost $6+ trillion. How about we disclose where that money went? And even free energy. I mean, anybody who has done a little bit of homework on the science, free energy is another thing that could be weaponized. The same that can power your home can also blow up a bank. And this has been known for a long. Some of the scientists who know that, they go, this is a double-edged sword. So that's why a big part of what we want to know is that, if we have to lock our doors because we don't even know if our neighbor's going to rob us, can we be so sure that our neighbor isn't going to turn a death ray on us? I mean, really, this is not an exaggeration. As corrupted as we've become through these systems, largely, it's at the point where you have to say, are we ready to play with this next level of fire? And we could be ready. We could be ready really quickly, but we're going to have to look at what the installations are. Look and not stop looking at the cabal. If you get robbed, the cabal probably didn't do it. All right? I mean, there's other ways they rob you, but as far as break and entry, in most cases, it won't be the cabal. It'll be one of us, a neighbor or somebody who came into the neighborhood. It will be one of us regulars, one of us, little people. So until little people stop fucking with each other, think about what happens with something like free energy. I mean, it isn't just here you go. There is a lot of deep thinking to go with this. And so, but if we could clear out, if we could leave our various isms, we might be able to cohere and understand that we have a common unity as humanity, and then also, reading the various things. I mean, the Anunnaki story is a beautiful story to show how much, especially when you can get the real stuff, how much they basically fear us. I mean, their only recourse when things get out of hand is to take some kind of space beam and blow shit up, Sodom and Gomorrah and the rest of that stuff. So but it's when you think of that kind of firepower that has to be used, that isn't from a place of strength. And what is it about us that gets them so crazy? And I think first of all, it's our creativity. It is the fact that we are on a planet that will feed us endlessly for a little bit of labor. And actually, we don't need them. We don't need the priestly class. We don't need any of that. We need our own. We need to have our own wisdom, and then we need to have the wisest among us, to counsel with. Similarly, when it comes to ET disclosure, you have to think of, from their perspective, from what we can tell, it seems like on their planets, there's usually some kind of unanimity of who they are, which is one of the reasons why you'll have different systems. They used to be in the Pleiades, now they're in Orion, or vice versa, because one had to leave the other place because it was full of shitheads. And but at least what it is there's no longer unity in certain places, so they relocate so they can have new unity. So look at our planet right now. Look at our planet, and if you look at the UN, okay, Saudi Arabia is the head of the Human Rights Commission. I mean, that's a joke. As far as human rights go, I mean, there are other countries that certainly deserve to be running the human rights better. But even the UN, I mean, come on, guys. I mean, do we really take that seriously? They're put, their Agenda 21. You might have heard about it in 2030. Where they want people in cities. Basically, they're trying to. They have control of the planet, the ecosystem, the system that we come out of that is ours to use. No. They want to officiate over that. So without a world body, Exactly who are these ETs supposed to come to and speak to? So so for me, any really well-meaning ETs would see it. It isn't. This is not the time. So anybody who might step in is a conspirator, in my opinion. The world is too fractured for us to think that disclosure, whoever gets disclosed, is going to be working for us. I mean, everything always gets presented for us. Every bill that gets passed, oh, the Patriot Act was done for our security. The TSA, fondling you is for your security. It's always sold as one thing when it's another. It's really the inversion trick. One system's belief creates the heroes of another system as the demons. It's on and on and on. It's pure mindfuck. And it's been going on for thousands of years. But it's been going on for thousands of years in isolated pockets. It's now that it's kind of gotten worldwide. Like I said, between first you had the priestly class, and then you started having city-states, and then the systems, and they just keep on rolling out, one after the other, after the other, after the other. So we really have to pull together. And when I see people there are people who really think that the world is in danger because we've pulled out of this out of certain protocols, and think that CO2 is going to roast us. It's the science around that is so bad, and they're counting on you not knowing better science. Somebody like myself who grew up a very academic and very science oriented way, biology, earth science, whatever. I mean, and also being able to look at charts. It was warmer during the Renaissance than it is now. It was warmer during the Minoan times than it is now. It was warmer during the Roman times than it is now. It was warmer during the Egyptian times than it was then. And then there was a period in the 1800s where there was the year without summer, and it was a very cool couple of years. We're climbing out of that colder period. So, of course, temperatures have been rising since then. These statistics and how they're presented are counting on you first of all, they're counting on you to trust them. And there are not, when it comes to positions of authority, there is little trust. I'm not saying none, but there is very little. So we need to be speaking to each other. And if we have disagreements, let's just powwow over it. In an ideal world, we have a good meal and then sit around a campfire and figure it out. But right now, we still have the internet that's up. So let's figure it out this way before the Mr. Spaceman gets unleashed. Okay? Danger, Will Robinson. Let me see if I have anything here, because I can see I'm coming up on the half-an-hour mark. Yeah, I just a perversion of natural cycles of death and Mother Nature. That'll too long. Disclosure to the UN, Vatican, and the priest class, and then how about we just close off with a little bit of what some of the concepts that are certainly played with in the kind of community that I might be talking to, the kind of people I might be talking to. Time travel. Time travel might be correct, right? Different timelines and whatever. So then, if you can play with that, then you also can see how again with certain kinds of systems how things like prophecy can work out. If you can travel through time, think of how prophecy can be done. So I think I'm going to close that there. Call that the Mystic Brew. I thank you for any new subscribers. I lost a few, but that was after Cosmic Emporium. And in that Cosmic Emporium, we spoke, some of the conversation turned towards somebody who was very popular among some people. And so I have a feeling that speaking poorly of us, not even terribly poorly, but, honestly, about a certain individual I think might have led to some lack of subscribers. I've been wanting to do a Mystic Brew for a few days, but I'm just, the downloads, the inspirations, the ahas, the like, oh my God, look at this big picture. It's getting, kind of getting this huge view, and it's like, well, what kind of soundbite can I pull out of that to put into a half an hour to 40-minute delivery, and to have enough to feed you, to feed an idea, to share an idea that is digestible, because indigestion won't work. It has to be digestible, and so that the nutrients in what I hope is in some of the material I'm sharing are able to be picked up into the bloodstream and find its way into the software, or the wetware, excuse me. I want to have my language right. So that's it. That's going to be my Mystic Brew. I love you all, really do. Love for all, hatred for none. But the systems, you're free to hate those. The inhuman things, oh boy, let's know how much we hate them. And let's find out if there's any of those systems and their fuckery inside our wetware, and let us want to uninstall that. So stay sane, and let's try to think as teams, and let's pursue wisdom that has to have knowledge, but let's make the wisdom, the fruit of knowledge, be more important than data points that we might be bringing around from different sources. Let's bring our data sources and come to some common wisdom that we can use to get to the next level and really make a better world. And I leave you with that. So see you next time.